I first saw him hunched over a torn trash bag near the edge of the road, his dark coat caked in mud and blood. I was on my way back from the store, just a 10-minute drive down a winding mountain road, and there he was like a ghost dragged out of the forest. First, I thought he was dead. He didn't flinch when I stopped the truck, didn't lift his head, just stayed there, paw digging through plastic like it was instinct, not hunger, moving slow and stiff like something was broken. I should have kept driving. That's what any sane man would have done. Instead, I left the engine running and stepped out. The air was still. No wind, no birds, just the crunch of my boots on gravel. I stopped maybe 10 feet away. His side was rising and falling barely, ribs showing. His left flank was matted with something dark and wet. A wound. Flies buzzed over it. He looked old, worn, like a bear at the end of his time, but still stubborn enough not to go quietly. I don't know how long I stood there. 5 minutes? 10? I was holding a half-full grocery bag with a loaf of bread and a can of soup in it. I reached into the bag and tore off a chunk of the bread. I tossed it gently toward him. Nothing. I tossed another piece. Closer. This time his head lifted an inch. Then two. Eyes glassy. He sniffed the air, then lowered his head and took the bread between his front teeth. Slow, careful, like he was expecting it to hurt. I walked back to the truck, sat inside, and watched him finish it. 3 hours later, I was back in the cabin. It wasn't mine, technically, belonged to my uncle who hadn't used it since the pandemic. He let me stay there after the divorce, said it might clear my head. I'd lost my job 2 months before the marriage ended. Apparently, I'd become someone hard to live with. The place was small. No TV, no cell reception, barely working plumbing. But it had silence. After the last 2 years, silence was something. That night, just past 11, I heard something outside. A thud, then another. Soft crunching over dry needles. I didn't have a gun, just a rusted hatchet and a shovel by the back door. I peeked through the kitchen window. Moonlight cut across the clearing. And there he was, 20 feet from the porch. Just sitting. He wasn't looking at me. He wasn't looking at anything. Just breathing. His chest rising and falling a little faster now, but steady. I should have been scared. But I wasn't. I was curious. Why was he back? I opened the fridge. No meat. Just a jar of peanut butter and 2 apples. I grabbed one, cracked open the door, and rolled it across the porch. It hit a wooden plank and came to a stop halfway. He didn't move for a long time. Then slowly he got up, limped forward, took the apple in his teeth and sank back down. I sat by the door watching him until 2 in the morning. Next day I didn't see him. Figured he was gone. But by evening, I noticed paw prints near the back shed. Deep ones. He'd circled the house. I left 2 slices of bread on the porch. They were gone by morning. By the 3rd night, he showed up before sundown. Still limping, but standing taller. He waited. Didn't come close. Just watched. As if expecting something from me. I boiled rice and cut up the last apple. Laid it on a plate and slid it to the edge of the steps. He came closer this time, 6 feet. Ate without looking up. Then he turned and walked back toward the trees. Kept happening. Every night. I started to get anxious. What if he became dependent? What if someone saw us? What if he snapped one day? I called a local wildlife office. Left a message. No reply. I asked the woman at the gas station if she'd seen bears this close to the road before. She just laughed. It's spring. They're all hungry. Just don't feed them. You'll regret it. But I'd already started. One night, after the 5th visit, I was drifting off on the couch when I heard a scraping sound. Not at the front. The back of the house. I crept around with a flashlight. And there he was. Not rummaging. Not looking for food. He was lying by the back wall. Just breathing. Like he didn't know where else to go. That's when I realized he wasn't just hungry. He was alone. For 2 days, I tried to stop feeding him. I left the porch empty. Didn't go outside after sunset. I ignored the sounds. Branches cracking, soft steps on gravel. But every night, just before midnight, I'd hear that slow, dragging breath outside my window. I thought maybe he'd move on. That if I didn't feed him, he'd forget about me. Go back to wherever he came from. But he didn't. By the 3rd night, I caved. Maybe out of guilt. Maybe I just didn't want to sit in silence anymore. I took an old can of beans from the pantry, heated it, and set it on a flat rock 10 feet from the house. He came an hour later. I didn't watch him this time. I just sat at the kitchen table, staring at the door, listening to him eat. It was quiet, No snarling. No noise except the slow scrape of his teeth on metal. The next morning, the can was licked clean. That afternoon, I drove into town to get fuel and check for any messages. At the gas station, I ran into a guy I'd seen a few times before. A short, wide man in his 50s with sunburned cheeks and a thick green jacket. "You staying up in that cabin past Devil's Curve?" he asked. I nodded. "Then you've seen him, the big old bear." I hesitated. "Yeah." He leaned in. "Name's Rick. I do patrols for the Forest Service. That bear's been around for years. Mean bastard. Was alpha up near Granite Ridge until last spring. Young males ran him out. Heard he almost didn't make it through the winter." "He's not aggressive," I said. "He's just tired." Rick shrugged. "He's dangerous. Old doesn't mean soft. You should report it. Don't feed him. Seriously. You think you're helping, but you're not." I didn't reply. When I got home, he was already there, lying in the same spot by the back wall, his head down, breathing shallow. I walked out with a bottle of water and a can of tuna. He didn't lift his head until I sat down across from him, maybe 6 feet away. His eyes were sunken. I could see the old scars now, faded white across his shoulders and face. His ear was torn, and there was a wound near his left leg, raw, infected. The smell hit me hard. I talked to him, not because I thought he'd understand, but because it felt wrong not to. "You should have gone back to the mountains," I said. "You're not supposed to be here." He blinked. That was all. I opened the tuna and slid it closer. He ate it, slow, without urgency, then lowered his head again. I got up, walked to the shed, found my old first aid box, bandages, alcohol wipes, latex gloves. I stood there staring at it for 10 minutes. Then I went back. He didn't move when I sat beside him. I poured some water into a bowl, nudged it closer. He drank. When I touched his leg, he tensed. I froze, but he didn't lash out. Just looked at me, eyes dim and distant. I tore the packaging from the alcohol wipe. The second it touched his wound, he let out a low growl. Not a threat, more like pain. I kept my hand steady. He let me clean it. That night I couldn't sleep. Not from fear, but from something else. It was the way he let me help. The way he didn't fight, like he'd already given up on fighting. I sat on the porch until morning, watching the tree line, listening for anything out of place. Around 4, I heard a distant sound. Branches snapping high up the ridge. Maybe elk. Maybe something else. When I checked on him at sunrise, he was in the same place. The bandage was still wrapped tight, but the area around the wound had turned darker, swollen. He didn't eat that morning. Didn't drink. He looked at me and let out a sound I'll never forget. Not a growl. Not a roar. Just a soft, cracked breath like something breaking apart inside. That's when I knew I couldn't leave him here. I had no plan. No vet would come this far. The nearest animal sanctuary was 100 miles away, and they didn't take bears. I checked last year when I found a wounded fox, but I had a truck. I cleared out the bed, lined it with old blankets. Then I opened both gates, backed up as close as I could to the side of the house. I didn't know if he'd get in. I didn't know if he'd even stand. I knelt beside him, whispered, "Come on, old man. I'm not letting you die out here." He didn't move. I stood, walked to the tailgate, and waited. And after 5 long minutes, I heard him shift. Scraping paws. A low grunt. He rose, unsteady, limped toward me slowly, like every step hurt more than the last. He climbed in, and I exhaled for the first time in hours. I had no clue where we were going, but we were going somewhere. I started making calls the second we got cell reception. That was maybe 15 miles down the mountain. By then, the bear was curled in the truck bed, not sleeping, just breathing slow and shallow. His eyes followed the trees as we passed them, but I don't think he really saw anything. I called every vet I could think of. 3 towns, 6 clinics. Most didn't answer. The ones that did hung up the moment I said the word bear. One guy asked if it was a cub. When I said no, he laughed. "You think I'm gonna treat a full-grown grizzly? What the hell's wrong with you? He's not aggressive. He's injured. He needs help. So do a lot of things, man. This ain't a dog." He hung up. I pulled over at a rest stop near an overlook. Checked the back. He was awake, but barely. There was blood on the blankets now. More than before. I got back in, stared at the road for a while. Then I called a woman named Janice. She'd helped me once when I found a raccoon caught in a fence. Runs a small wildlife center 2 hours north. She listened quietly, then said, "You brought him with you?" "Yeah. I don't have the space, and I sure as hell don't have the permits. He's a wild predator, and you're driving around with him like he's a Labrador. You realize what you're risking?" "I know." Silence. Then she said, "If he dies in that truck, they'll blame you. If he lives and hurts someone, they'll charge you. Either way, you lose. I'm not leaving him. Then find someplace no one goes, somewhere quiet, and pray he dies fast." She hung up too. The rain started 30 minutes later. Not a drizzle. A wall of water that made the road vanish in front of me. The mountain curves were already dangerous. Slick rock, narrow shoulders, loose gravel. Now they were suicide. We skidded twice. The second time, we nearly went over the edge. Branches slapped the windshield. The wipers couldn't keep up. I leaned forward, hands clenched so hard on the wheel my knuckles ached. I saw the sign a second before we passed it. Marshall Dairy, private property. The driveway was overgrown, mud up to the doors, but I turned in anyway. Half a mile in, there was a clearing. Collapsed barn. A house missing half its roof. Windows shattered. Weeds everywhere. Perfect. I parked behind what was once a chicken coop. Opened the tailgate. He didn't move. I climbed in, grabbed the edge of the blanket under him and tugged. It didn't take much. He slid off, hit the mud with a grunt, and tried to rise. His legs buckled. I got under one side of him, braced his weight against my hip, and half-walked, half-dragged him under the overhang of the broken barn. He collapsed there, didn't try again. I covered him with the driest blanket I had. Then I sat beside him. We stayed there for 3 days. The storm didn't let up. Thunder cracked the sky. Trees snapped in the wind. I made a small fire using old planks and wet matches. I boiled rice and beans in a dented pan. He didn't eat. I cleaned the wound twice a day, flushed it with warm water, tried to keep flies off it with strips of old shirt. Every time I touched him, he flinched, but never fought. I slept in shifts, a few hours here, an hour there. Every time I woke up, I'd check his breathing. Still there, still weak. On the second night, I woke gasping. Couldn't tell if it was a nightmare or just exhaustion. He was beside me, curled tight, eyes open. He was watching me. By the third night, I could barely keep upright. My back ached. My hands shook from holding tools too long. I ran out of canned food. The fire had gone out. I was too tired to relight it. I sat there, wrapped in a tarp, staring into the dark. His breathing had turned rough. Like every inhale scratched his throat. A dry, rattling sound that got worse every hour. And then, howling, high-pitched, distant, from across the ridge. Coyotes? No, too deep. Another joined in. Then another. Not angry, not frantic, but slow, long, like a call. I stood up. My knees buckled. I grabbed the post beside me. He didn't move. His eyes were open, listening. And for the first time since I met him, I saw something behind those eyes. Recognition. I whispered, "Is that them?" He blinked, once, then closed his eyes again. That night I didn't sleep. I sat beside him, listening to the wind and the wolves, waiting. They came around noon the next day. 2 men in a rusted green pickup, rifles mounted in the back window. I heard the engine before I saw them, crunching through mud and gravel, tires slipping. When they stepped out, one wore a blaze orange cap, the other a flannel shirt stained at the elbows. I stood up from beside the barn, hands in plain sight. "Place looks like hell," the one in the cap said. "Didn't know anyone still squatted out here. Just waiting out the storm," I answered. The man in flannel walked past me without asking, peered under the barn's overhang. Then he saw the bear. He whistled, low. "Well, I'll be damned. You really got one." "He's injured," I said. "He needs help." The man in the cap raised an eyebrow. "Help? That thing's 100 pounds from death. What you planning to do? Give him a second chance at retirement?" I didn't answer. "You know what that is?" Flannel guy asked. "That's an apex predator that ain't apex anymore. He's old, weak, alone. Should have been dead last winter." "I know," I said. "You feeding him?" "Yes." The guy in flannel turned to his friend. "Jesus, this guy's hand-delivering food to a dying bear." "Look," the man in the cap said, stepping closer. "We could take care of it. Quick, clean. We got the rounds for it. No need for him to suffer, and no need for you to get in trouble if someone finds out." "No," I said firmly. Don't be stupid. It's just a matter of time before someone calls it in. And when they do, you'll be the one they find, or worse. I said no. They exchanged glances. Suit yourself, the man in the cap muttered. But if he wanders onto someone's land and kills a dog, or worse? He won't. He smirked. Bears don't do second chances, friend. They left 10 minutes later, tires spinning as they backed out. I stood in the clearing long after the sound of their truck disappeared. That night was the coldest yet. The fire wouldn't stay lit. My hands were too stiff to strike the matches right. I wrapped us both in blankets. He hadn't moved since noon. His breathing had turned shallow again. Quieter. I sat beside him, back against the splintered post, and stared at the sky. No stars. Just thick, moving clouds. I don't know what made me start thinking about my dad. Maybe it was the silence. The way this place echoed the same cold I felt the night we lost him. He died in a nursing home 3 years back. Alone. Staff said he passed in his sleep. Peacefully. But I remember visiting him a week before. He'd been sharp. Still knew my name. Still asked about the garden. But the nurses said he'd stopped eating. Stopped talking. Stopped wanting anything. The thing that killed him wasn't disease. It was loneliness. Same kind of loneliness I saw in this bear. I reached over, placed my hand gently on the side of his neck. Warm barely. His eyes didn't open. You're not going alone, I said. I stayed up the whole night, feeding the fire when I could, whispering whatever came to mind, just so he wouldn't leave to silence. By morning, the wind had calmed. Ashes from the fire glowed faint orange. My legs were numb, my face raw from the wind. He hadn't moved. I stood slowly, knees popping, stretched, turned to check his breathing. Still there. Then, he lifted his head, just a few inches, but his eyes opened. He looked straight at me, crouched. Hey! I whispered. He sniffed the air, then, slowly, rolled onto his stomach, tried to stand. His legs shook, gave out once, but he pushed again, and this time he stayed up. He looked toward the trees, the ridge beyond the clearing. I didn't stop him. I just watched. He took a step, then another, limping slow, but steady. Then he disappeared into the woods. I stayed at the barn that day, packed slowly, cleaned what I could, burned the rest. The storm had passed, but something else lingered in the air, like the final chapter of a book you're afraid to close. I went back to the cabin. Every night that week, I looked out toward the tree line. Empty. No paw prints. No heavy breath. Nothing. On the 8th night, I stopped checking. Then, on the 9th, I heard the crunch of pine needles, turned on the porch light, and there he was, not as close as before, just at the edge of the woods, watching, not hungry, just present. I didn't move, neither did he. Then, slowly, he turned and walked back into the forest. But I knew he'd be back. A month passed. The cabin felt smaller somehow, but not in a bad way. Just fuller, like the silence had changed shape. I was back to working remotely. My old job had offered me a contract gig. Nothing fancy, just writing manuals, sorting data. But it paid the bills, and the routine after everything felt grounding. I chopped wood in the mornings, took walks in the afternoons, kept the porch clear, watched the tree line every night at sunset. He started coming back on the 3rd day after he disappeared. Never close, always just far enough to see, but not touch. I'd sit on the steps with a coffee. He'd settle near the edge of the woods, and we'd just sit, sometimes for 10 minutes, sometimes for hours. He never asked for food, never approached the porch. He just showed up. I didn't talk much, didn't want to break whatever was holding that space together. One night, near the end of April, the wind changed. I felt it in my chest before I saw the clouds roll in, thick and dark, crawling low across the ridgeline. The first crack of thunder shook the windows. I opened the door, stepped onto the porch. He was already there, closer than usual. Rain started slow, then fell in sheets. The trees bent, wind howled, and then, a sound, not from him, from the other side of the clearing. A rustle, sharp and low, too heavy for wind. I grabbed the flashlight, flicked it on. 2 eyes reflected back, low to the ground, watching. Coyote, maybe, or a mountain lion. I felt him shift beside me, his body tensed, head lowered, shoulders squared. A low growl built in his throat, deep, solid, the kind of sound that didn't need translation. The eyes vanished. He didn't move right away, just stood guard until the wind eased. Then he turned, looked at me once, and walked back into the trees. I didn't sleep that night. By morning, the sky had cleared. The world was soaked, glistening. I walked the perimeter, checked for tracks. No sign of the predator, but also no sign of him. For the first time in weeks, he didn't come back. I waited the next night, and the next. Nothing. On the fourth morning, I found it. Near the edge of the clearing, half covered in pine needles. A bone. Clean. Picked bare. Not just any bone. The same one I'd given him weeks ago. From a leftover roast I'd tossed out on a paper plate. I thought he'd buried it or forgotten. But now it was here. Placed. Not dropped. Not random. Left. I crouched beside it for a long time. Didn't touch it. Didn't need to. That evening, I didn't look for him. I sat on the porch, watched the sun melt behind the peaks. Felt the chill rise off the ground. Something in me had shifted. Not all at once. Not in a cinematic way. Just slowly. Gradually. Like rain soaking into wood. I don't tell people about him now. Not really. What would I say? That I shared weeks of my life with a half-dead bear who stared down ghosts and never once growled at me? That I watched him fall apart and rebuild himself just enough to walk back into the world? They'd laugh. Or worse, pity me. But I know what I saw. What I felt. What he left behind. Sometimes, late at night, I hear something in the woods. Could be anything. Wind. Deer. Imagination. But a part of me always listens differently. Always hopes. I used to think I saved him. Now I think he just gave me a reason to stay. To sit still. To care again. And maybe that's the only kind of saving that ever really matters.